there is some interesting context around these passages, in particular the Bible passage, that sort of gives a little bit of nuance to the discussion, the points that Christ is making in that passage. These are words that were unfamiliar to me. Perhaps they are also unfamiliar to you. One of those words is raka, R-A-C-A, which apparently was a very derogatory or insulting term. It was translated as fool. If you call your brother a fool, essentially you're in trouble. And the other is a much more loaded term, comes at the end of the reading, where Christ is saying, if you call your brother an outcast of God, you will be in danger of hellfire. Hellfire comes from the Greek word Gehenna. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which I looked up. It's a very interesting term with a bit of nuance to it. It's a place, and historically it was it's this narrow valley near Jerusalem where ages before, when the Jews were practicing idolatry, they would sacrifice their children to the deity that they were worshiping, which of course is just kind of a bad idea in general, you might say. But so the place sort of had that stigma around it, but then because of the stigma around it, it became essentially a kind of trash heap where all the refuse from the city was brought out and it was burned, as well as bodies and criminals, and there was just sort of this icky energy going on there. And the fire was always burning. It was like there was always plenty of junk to throw into the fire, so the darn thing was always burning. Hence, you get this image of, gee, that's a place I just don't really want to put on my vacation list of, let's go see Gehenna, let's go hang out in Gehenna or whatever. Well, if we tease out the reading, what the reading is saying, or what Christ's message is be careful what box you place your brother, sister inside of, because that's the box you're putting yourself inside of. It's just about the same size. And so if you're calling the brother a fool, now, you could, in theory, make the argument that somebody who acts foolish is a fool. However, to say it to the person is to deliver an extra measure of oomph to the message that tends to have a ripple effect, which means, well, you better be accountable for that because there is a repercussion to it. There is a consequence to it. And even more so, calling that brother or sister an outcast of God is to begin to erode that person's self-confidence and belief in their own high potential, which in turn, by very definition, defeats one's own ability to affirm that same reality within. And it's an interesting dynamic. I was reflecting on this in regard to human psychology. There is an experiment, a kind of game, but it has a psychological implication to it, or research has gone into it. If the game is played in a very simple way, there are two people, and there's an envelope with money. And just for sake of being specific, say there's $100 in the envelope. The two people walk into the room with the envelope that has $100 in it. And the deal is this. Person one gets to decide how to divide that $100. Person two gets to decide whether they will accept or reject the deal that person one makes. If they accept, they both walk away with the money. If they reject, neither of them walks away with anything. So person one has the incentive to make a deal that person two will accept. But person one may also be a little bit self-interested and may decide, how far can I get away with this? If I say, well, I want 99 and you get 1, the other person may say, maybe not. But if he says 50-50, well, statistically, here's where it gets interesting. Statistically, anything less than 20%, so if you say, you get to keep $20, I get to keep $80. You get down below that, the value of sort of saying, I don't like the deal because I don't think it's fair that you get to take so much more, even though I'm just walking away with money. I mean, just as the person himself is concerned, hey, I'm coming away pretty good on this. But that sense of, wait a minute, this is not fair. It's not fair for you to get more than me, so much more. Below 20%, they will say, forget it. I'd rather go with nothing so that you go with nothing. In other words, I would rather suffer pain because I can inflict a certain amount on you too, which is really just not a very uplifting way to go at life. You could think, gosh, in the abstract, somebody walks into a room and they're going to turn around and walk out of it with money. Why wouldn't they accept anything, even if it's a nickel out of $100? Why? I mean, just take the money and walk. But no, there's that sense of, but it's not fair, but it's not right. He should, blah, 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 blah. Well, often in life, that's the dynamic that creates the message, well, I don't like you. I'm angry with you. You're not any good. That word raka means worthless or just like really bad, just really not useful in a nice way. And we can say that to somebody. And there's this sense of, well, it may hurt me, but I know it's going to hurt you too. So, let's go there. But we would rather live on a higher level. And it takes a certain amount of, yes, patience to learn to live with ourselves and grow in the process and to let others have their space to grow in that process as well. And it's an evolution. It's an evolution of consciousness. It's an evolution of awareness. And frankly speaking, it's one of the reasons that we practice meditation here. It's one of the reasons that we have group meditation, such as on Sunday morning. And we do certain little rituals like the fire ceremony that we do prior to Sunday service. Yes, those things are valuable and important, but the meditation in particular helps us to limit our identification with that lower part that says, I would rather stick it to life just because I enjoy the sticking it to, and I would rather live on a higher level. And the interesting part of this, though, is that I don't want you to take my word for it. In fact, I would specifically suggest that you not take my word for it, that meditation works in this regard. Because my word for it is pointless to you unless it's useful in your own actual experience. This is the benefit of a more scientific approach to the spiritual life and spiritual evolution. It can be helpful for you to hear me say, meditation works. Meditation is powerful and transformative. I know so from my own actual experience. It's not a theory for me anymore. However, if you walk away and say, oh, I believe what he says, I believe that is true, but then you don't do anything about it, that belief doesn't actually really get you much of anywhere. It's just another nice belief. It's like it reminds me of china that sits in the shell, in the cupboard, the nice china hutch, wedding china that you get for your wedding, and it's all very nice and neat and beautiful, Maybe it comes out once a year for Thanksgiving or Christmas or something, but most of the time it sits in the cupboard, without getting any dust on it and all of that. It's not all that helpful in day-to-day life. I remember Nirmala and I got wedding china for our wedding in the ages ago now, almost 25 years ago now, and we made a commitment that we would actually use it. And so for quite a while, we actually, mostly in daily life, we would have our nice china, which of course has certain implications to it. I dropped one of the plates once and broke it, which was $40 at the time to replace the darn thing. It was like, oh, that's painful. We'll be a little careful with this thing. But, meditation is something that is useful in every day. You can put it on and you can grow it. And this is a beautiful thing. It doesn't matter if you're any good at it or not. It really, truly does not matter. We can be conditioned to think, oh, well, but if I'm not any good at it, I shouldn't bother because, hey, other people, well, for them, it really works. It's really, really good for them. They get results. But I just am not good at this, therefore, I'm not going to do it. Well, that's a little bit like going to the store and coming home with a faucet and turning it on and saying, well, this stupid faucet, it doesn't work. You take it out of the box, you move the handle, and no water comes out. Come on, what the heck? It doesn't work. Well, maybe if you installed it and hooked it to the plumbing and hooked the water pressure up to it, you turn the faucet and water comes out. So ourselves, we have to actually hook the process up. You have to actually move the flow through it. That flow is our heart's love, our awakening aspiration. Yes, then it actually has a result. There's a story that Master told, Yogananda told, of the king whose name has become the name of India. India is the way we call it. The word India is a Western name for India, but the country itself is called Bharat. And this king, who lived centuries ago, maybe millennia ago, was a great warrior, and he had conquered, probably historically, the entire land of India that is now known as India, which meant conquering lots of little kingdoms, lots of little fiefdoms, or whatever you might say. And when he reached the end of that process, he was installed in his own capital and living in his beautiful palace and thinking, this is great, this is wonderful. But time went by, years went by, he got a little restless. And it was like, well, now what am I going to conquer? And he thought about, well, maybe I can, his kingdom went up to the Himalayas, which is kind of a traditional border of India. And north of that is Tibet and Bhutan and so forth. Well, those kingdoms were considered forbidden. You didn't cross the Himalayas to do war with them for whatever reason. I can think of a number of them. For one, it would be very difficult to cross the Himalayas with an army, but there could be other ones as well. And he was introspective enough to think, well, I remember the suffering. I remember the bloodshed. I remember the deaths that came from these wars of conquest for me to create my large kingdom. I don't really want to recreate more of that. But what else am I going to do with my life? And then novel thought occurred to him. Maybe I could come to know God. And he thought, well, gosh, how could I do that? And he went to the priest that had been the ceremonial priest for his family and for the government for a long time. And he said to the man, I want you to reveal God to me. You and your forefathers back through the centuries have been the family to do the ceremonies for my kingdom and my people, and the royal treasury has supported your family for hundreds of years. So this is my command to you. Reveal God to me. You have 1 week. And if you fail to do so, I will separate your head from the rest of your body, and that's how that deal will end. And this priest was not very happy about this because he didn't feel like he could succeed in his mission. He really didn't know what on earth he was going to do. And 6 days went by, and his son came home. His grown son had been away, and the son was regarded as a bit mentally unstable, generally. And the father, too, sort of thought, I don't know what this guy has to say. Well, it turned out that the son actually had deep realization. And when he heard the father's dilemma, the priest's dilemma, he said, I can take care of this. But you have to go to the king and you have to follow my instructions and get him to follow my instructions. So the father went, and the instructions were like this. He said, tell the king that he has to obey everything that I tell him, and then he will receive what he's seeking. So the priest went, told the king this. The king said, okay, I will do it. So this son, whose name was Ramana, took his father and the king out into the forest. And they found a place where there was a little bit of a clearing. There were 2 large trees there. And the king had been watching, and he saw that the son was carrying this bundle over his arm and didn't know what was in it, was a little bit curious. The son got them there, and he said to the king, okay, please stand by that tree. And he went into his bundle, and he pulled out a rope. And with the rope, he tied the king to the tree, and quite securely, too. And then he took his father and he said, all right, now you come to this other tree and I'm going to tie you to this tree. And that's what he did. So he had the 2 ropes, tied them both. Now he said to the king, I want you to repeat these words out loud. I, King Bharat, say to you, priest, you must extricate yourself and me inside of the next 7 days, or else I will take your head off. And so the king very dutifully repeated these words and out loud, and that was the end. And then they both looked at the son and were like, now what? And the king started to get a little irate about this because he couldn't really see what was going to happen usefully. And he finally said, how on earth is he going to extricate me? He's tied up too. What's he going to do? He can't, how can he untie himself and come and untie me? And the son looked at him and said, King, understand the message behind the situation. How can this person who is tied up to the tree free you? He's tied to the same delusion that you're tied to. How is he going to reveal God to you if he also is bound? You have to have somebody who's not bound. And he said, I myself actually do know God, and I can help you if you are willing to take instruction, if you are willing to follow a certain path. That path is an inner path. Meditation is one of the most beautiful ways and one of the surest ways, exercising patience to follow that path to actual knowledge. But it's not theoretical. It's not something that someone can tell you. It's something you have to come to know in yourself. And that process is one that we understand from our own lives. There is a natural evolution of awakening that comes into our hearts where we finally say, I don't know, I want to know. How can I open myself to know? And we see this in the awakening of natural love in our own lives. If you think of a teenage boy and a teenage girl, both of them want love. Both of them want to experience something more in their lives. The boy is going to have to take a chance. He's going to have to take the chance to ask the girl, would you like to go to see a movie or have coffee with me or something? And the girl can respond forget you. I'm not interested in you. And the boy is going to feel very sad and silly and defeated by that. She may say, yes, I would like to. And then she herself is going to have to put out the energy to want to go forward with that. If you think they're going to go to the dance, he's going to have to rent the tux and figure out the whole thing. She's going to buy a dress. You know, it always amazed me that my sisters would go and buy a new dress for a dance. I just thought, it's like, you know, you think all the teenage boys on whom that is lost. I just was like, you know, it sort of seems kind of obvious now, but you know, she's putting out energy. She's going to get her hair done. She's going to get makeup and put it on. You know, again, I was sort of amazed by this process, watching my two sisters, you know, spend hours at the mirror and, you know, going through this whole thing, all of which was lost on me, but apparently wasn't entirely lost on various other young males of the species. But nevertheless, there's this sense of, I am willing to risk, I am willing to put out energy on the hope of a response, a positive response. And there comes a time where we're willing to do this with the divine, where we're willing to say, Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, whatever concept we have of God, even if it's my own higher self, I am willing to try to walk into the unknown. There's a beautiful line in the Festival of Light that we'll do in a few minutes that says, peace awaits you in the unknown. Now, human nature does not corroborate that until it has experience. That's a theory that may seem like, whoa, I don't know, I don't think peace awaits me in the unknown. I mean, I'm scared to death of the unknown. You know, the unknown is like there be griffins, you know, that the part of the map where they don't know what's over there. So it's obviously sea monsters and griffins and, you know, goblins and creepy whatever's over there. We wade into the unknown of our own being, and what do we find? We find peace. We find love. We find a divine awakening, a divine potential that we might have imagined existed, but we never actually knew it existed. So each of us has that divine potential. And to the degree that we're willing to follow it, we make a heaven for ourselves, the exact opposite of Gehenna, where the fire is always burning. We make a haven, we make a sylvan glade of bliss and beauty where everybody can live. There's enough room for everybody in that place. It's not like it's, you know, a little New York studio apartment and, you know, you have to turn sideways in order to get the frying pan out of the cupboard because there just isn't any room there. It's this huge, wonderful, blissful, beautiful place. Think of that as our own divine living potential. And we will grow into it in the most natural, the most organic, the most wonderful way, because it's our very own. It's not something anyone else can give to us, but neither is it anything that anyone else can prevent us from achieving and from realizing as our very own. We'll take an offering.